No one in Sycamore Falls felt the earth shudder when the meteor struck 6 miles north of town, but everyone heard the new sound that slid into the gaps between ordinary noises afterward. It was nothing you could consciously pick out. You could stand in the crater with a field recorder and capture only the hiss of wind over scorched gravel. Yet dogs set to whining at dusk, the owl population abandoned its roosts, and the streetlights on Birch Avenue flickered in a slow, arrhythmic pulse, as though the current itself were listening to a metronome no human could perceive. The first real sign that something was wrong arrived in Dr. Louise Fallon's examination room. On Monday morning, Everett Clancy, who taught civics at the high school and boasted perfect health for a man pushing 60, staggered in clutching his chest. And he said he'd spent the night sprinting from an unseen pursuer through a maze of carpeted hallways. He described the dream in such vivid detail, right down to the flickering fluorescence and the tang of industrial coffee left too long on a burner, that Louise thought he might be recalling a panic attack from real life, not sleep. She drew blood, ran an EKG, found nothing. When she suggested anxiety, Everett burst into tears. "Those hallways aren't from my head," he whispered. "They're from someone else's." By Wednesday, half the patients funneling through her office reported foreign dreams. Images, smells, whole emotional weather systems that felt imported. Not one considered the meteor. No one had stitched the threads together yet. Harper Reed did, though. Harper ran the low-wattage community radio station out of the former train depot. He registered the same inexplicable hum riding beneath the FM band. Whenever he boosted the gain, a bruise-colored waveform crawled across the oscilloscope, pulsing at 17.2 hertz, too low for human ears, but not, he knew, for the midbrain structures governing fear and memory. Infrasound could nauseate you, disorient you. It could even stoke religious ecstasy. Harper felt it in the back of his molars, a pressure like an impending nosebleed. He drove to the new crater Thursday night with an antenna rig strapped across the roof of his '95 Cherokee. The forest had been scorched to charcoal, branches lying as if a giant hand had mashed them flat. When Harper stepped from the car, the pressure intensified, an inaudible throb that clutched the air like a giant muscle spasm. He pointed the antenna toward the crater's center. The meter spiked. Something in the fractured hunk of extraterrestrial metal still cooling at the bottom was broadcasting. Harper thought of gamma rays, of contamination, but the voice of his inner gearhead whispered first. "I could tune this." He spent an hour collecting readings, then turned home through roads that shimmered with heat mirages, though the night air was crisp. Within 72 hours, Sycamore Falls transformed. The meteor's frequency didn't just seep through wiring or vibrate window panes. It washed across REM sleep like an invisible tide, lifting one person's dream, depositing it in another's skull. Lovers woke with the erotic diaries of strangers. Children recited pieces of boardroom jargon learned while piloting adult bodies through stress dreams. But the exchange was not symmetrical. People received dreams without relinquishing their own. Minds grew crowded, stuffed with alien urges and obsessions, private fetishes, crimes contemplated but never committed. You could look at your neighbor bagging groceries and suddenly know they fantasized about arson, or about the man in front of them in church pews, or about stepping off an overpass into traffic while feeling nothing at all. On Saturday morning, the town's first violence arrived. Milo Jennings, who pruned roses for the Historical Society, beat the mail carrier unconscious with a brass planter urn. He claimed afterward that the carrier had slithered into his bed the previous night and whispered nursery rhymes in his late mother's voice. The mailman, recovering in Louise Fallon's clinic, remembered no such thing. He did admit that he'd dreamed of drowning a dog, whose yaps kept him from sleep. Milo's dog, to be precise. Sheriff Cam Herrera could not build a coherent report. Witnesses contradicted themselves. Some seemed to confess to acts they'd never committed while awake. She phoned Harper, the closest thing Sycamore Falls had to a science correspondent, begging for any theory at all. He played her the infrasound on speaker, that tremor too low to hear but strong enough to shake the copper wiring in her office walls. A hummingbird's heart thudded wildly outside the window. "I think it's trading our dreams around," Harper said. "Dreams don't drive someone to crack a skull open," Cam protested. Harper almost said they could. He bit down on the words. He'd been receiving dreams too, pockets of someone else's yearning, a woman's desperate desire to fillet the skin from her own legs so she could walk on clean white bone. He had woken to the phantom taste of blood in his mouth, to the nearly orgasmic delight she took in sharpness. And then another dream, gentle but worse, standing over the DJ booth, looping the emergency broadcast tone while the whole town screamed in confusion. He suspected that fantasy came from him. Sunday services illustrated how fragile ordinary civility had become. Pastor Roland Clayton began his sermon on the gift of neighborly love, but paused mid-sentence. He looked at the congregation, rows of faces shining with sweat, and realized they all knew his secret. He could feel it ripple through them. The night before, he'd dreamed of defacing the church with graphic pornography. The impulse had frightened him so badly he'd woken in sobs. Now every congregant saw that picture in their mind. A woman laughed, short and hysterical. Someone else threw a hymnal. By the time Sheriff Herrera rushed in, communion wine streaked the altar, and Pastor Clayton crouched behind the pulpit with a broken arm. That afternoon, the town council met in emergency session and voted to quarantine the area. They lacked authority or plan. Still, they posted roadblocks with sawhorses and floodlights, scavenged from the high school theater department. It was theater in its own right, a statement to the universe that Sycamore Falls understood it was under siege. Night settled. The Meteor sang. People stopped calling them dreams and started calling them leaks. They lay down expecting invasion. Some attempted to stay awake. Caffeine pills, home-rigged alarms that triggered every 15 minutes. Insomnia only frayed tempers faster. A cluster of teenagers high on Adderall and terror set the VFW hall ablaze because one of them had seen, in leaked images, a veteran's memory of a My atrocity. They believed the old soldiers were plotting to reenact it in the town square. Harper's radio station reported each fire, each sudden beating, each unexplained death, a shared logbook for a collective nervous breakdown. By Tuesday, the town looked like a place evacuated for plague. Businesses shuttered, dogs roaming without leashes, rot beginning in the produce aisle of the grocery. Feral notes appeared on doorways, "Stay out, I know what you want." Harper sat amid racks of vinyl, watching the levels jump on his mixing board, though no human voice spoke. That was when the idea hit him. If the Meteor broadcast, perhaps he could jam it. He paged through schematics, older than he was, for Cold War air numbers stations. The trick wasn't brute force, but resonance. Find the frequency's harmonics, play them back, shifted half a phase, and the two waves would cancel destructive interference. Silence through mathematical violence. He called Cam, Louise, and Felicia Sontag, an electrical engineer now widowed twice, first by divorce, now by leaks. They met in the station's basement, a bunker of popcorn sealing asbestos and the smell of hot dust. Each had been awake for nearly 40 hours. Pupils dilated, jaws twitching with the faint echo of other people's hunger. Still, they listened while Harper outlined the plan. Truck the station's backup generator and a repurposed transmitter van to the crater, set up an array of speakers and drown the Meteor's song in its own reflection. "What if we make it worse?" Louise asked, rubbing a bruise no one else could see. "Then, at least we'll know," Cam said. Her hand rested on her service weapon, not from threat, but habit. Her holster felt safer than her own skull. They loaded equipment by flashlight. Outside, the town grumbled like a waking bear. From the shadows of Maple Street floated arguments, sobs, guttural sounds that did not belong to words. Cam drove the lead vehicle, lights off. Felicia sat beside her, charting resonance values on a digital oscilloscope. Harper rode the box truck, cradling a coiled XLR cable like rope. Fog hugged the ground along the forest road. When they reached the barricade of burned trees, Cam killed the engine. The crater loomed ahead, a hollow dish of shimmering glass where sand had fused from heat. At its center lay the Meteor fragment, still faintly luminous, studded with hexagonal facets that reminded Harper of a cuttlefish's eye. The air shook with a low pulse. No more hidden, you could feel it like a bass line now. They unloaded, working without speech, as though to open their mouths might let foreign dreams slip out. Harper ran cables to 4 high-frequency horns pointing inward. Felicia tuned the amplifier. Louise trailed a portable ECG strapped to her own chest, an early warning should the infrasound spike her heart into arrhythmia. Harper powered the generator. The cone speakers crackled. An eerie mirror tone rose, matching the Meteor's 17.2 hertz but offset by 180 degrees. For a moment nothing changed. Then the world exhaled. Leaves stilled on branches. Distant porch lights flicked to steady. Harper's molars stopped aching. "It's working," Felicia said, wonder cracking her fatigue. A scream shattered the hush. Across the crater rim, silhouettes plunged from the tree-lined dozens of townspeople. Wild-made, armed with household detritus, pruning shears, a croquet mallet, a leaking can of gasoline. They hurled themselves down the slope, skidding on glassed sand. "Kill it! Cut the noise!" someone shrieked, voice raw. "Can't be empty in there!" Cam stepped forward, badge glinting. "Stay back! We're stopping the signal!" But they didn't want it stopped. Harper realized too late. Some citizens had begun to worship the leaks. To them, the sudden silence felt like amputation. In the dull roar of shared minds, they'd found an intimacy deeper than anything family or church had given. Now Harper threatened to make each of them alone again inside their skulls. The first rock struck a speaker, caving the aluminum horn. Felicia shouted, trying to shield the amp. Cam drew her pistol, fired a warning shot that sparked off a boulder. No one slowed. They were all dreaming the same dream, Harper thought, and the dream said, "Keep singing." He dove for the amplifier, yanked a cable. The cancellation tone sputtered. Immediately the infrasound lurched back, doubled by echoes off the crater walls. Louder than before, a seismic moan that rattled his ribs. Harper dropped to his knees, nauseated. Townspeople froze mid-charge, palms pressed to temples. One woman choked out laughter and sobbing in the same breath. The hum vibrated them like tuning forks. Too much, too fast. Harper saw blood ooze from Everett Clancy's nose. Louise, crouched behind the generator, met Harper's eyes. Over the thrumming she mouthed, "Full phase flip." It was a gamble. Instead of precise cancellation, they'd overlay a wave amplified to identical frequency and phase, not opposite. The Meteor and speakers would reinforce each other, spike the infrasound high enough to surpass whatever mechanism swapped dreams. Blow the circuit. Maybe rupture eardrums or aneurysms first. Harper scrambled. He pushed the master fader to max, twisted the dial Felicia had warned him never to touch, a knob labeled simply Gain++ with a strip of red tape. The amps whined. A new pressure slammed outward, throwing him onto his back. For a heartbeat, the air looked grainy, as if filmed through static. The Meteor cracked. A hairline fissure raced across its surface. Light poured out. Not white, nor any color Harper recognized, but a brightness that left no afterimage, the way a note of perfect pitch leaves no echo. The hum snapped off. Silence smote the crater. Harper tasted ozone. He lifted his head. The townspeople lay scattered, groaning but alive. Cam checked pulses methodically, her own hands shaking. Felicia slumped against the generator, breathing through a split lip. Louise's ECG beeped, a calm rhythm. In the crater's center sat only shards, cooling fast, dull as river stones. Whatever engine had driven the signal was gone, torn open like a bell split through the seam. The cleanup began at dawn, though no agency would label it that. The incident officially remained a non-event. State troopers arrived, saw a busted PA system and a few concussed civilians, and wrote routine vandalism reports. Nothing glowed. Geiger counters clicked only for cosmic background radiation. By noon, the troopers left. Sycamore Falls was alone again. The leaks ceased that night. People slept 10-12 hours straight, waking with dreams that belonged to them, and them alone. Some wept from relief, others from grief at the sudden silence where once they'd known the hearts of neighbors, however ugly. Couples tested each other with tentative questions. Was that really you wanting our butcher's boy? Did you truly picture my death? The town's divorce lawyer could have retired rich. Had she not walked into the creek with stones in her pockets 2 days after the crater? Maybe her own dreams were worse than any she'd inherited. Harper reopened the radio station a week later. The oscilloscope displayed nothing but clean carrier waves. Listeners called in with birthday requests, pothole complaints, lost dog notices, ordinary life. Yet every so often, while cueing vinyl, Harper felt that phantom pressure in his teeth, the memory of a sound that had never reached his ears. Scientists would chalk it up to psychosomatic residue, a minor PTSD. Harper wasn't sure. Sometimes he believed the meteor hadn't died. It had merely shouted itself hoarse, lodged a shard of its voice inside every resident. A throat clearing between worlds. Sheriff Herrera found him on the station roof at sunset, watching swifts tumble around the antenna mast. "Town council thanks you," she said. "Won't put that in the minutes, I hope." She smiled, then studied him. "Do you miss it? The connection?" "Yes," he admitted. It's felt sacrilegious to say, but the leaks had been a communion, brutal yet intimate. "But I don't miss how fast we got ready to kill for it." Cam considered this. Maybe that was us all along. The meteor just took away the blindfold. Harper looked across Sycamore Falls. Pitched roofs glowing ember red, smoke from chimneys curling like questions. A few windows already curtained for the night. Behind each pane, a private theater of wants and terrors would spool across the sleeping mind, unseen, blessedly solitary. He switched on the transmitter. Static crackled, then the soft groove of a soul record from 1963. The singer crooned about lovers close enough to hear each other breathe. Harper let the needle play. Half a mile away, in the crater now fenced off with polite warning signs, something under the fused sand answered in a lullaby, too deep for ears, too gentle for seismographs. No one heard it, and no one dreamed anyone else's dream that night, yet the town on the hillside seemed to turn its collective head, as though listening for a child that had finally stopped crying.